going to go ahead and start installing the rear canopy pieces, sliders. What we need to do is measure to match this distance right here. So we're going to have to cut so much of this off, about that much. What will happen, this will actually sit inside with the slot facing up on the inside, and we are actually going to place this on here. We're going to draw a line down here to the back, and we're going to cut this section of the fuselage out because canopy has to ride inside and come to the outside at the back. So we'll go ahead and I'll get the center glass back on, and we'll get that marked and get this cut out in the right spots, and then we'll start making the mounts to put these in. You can see I have the center glass piece back on, and what we're going to do now, I actually have it marked already. I marked with a pencil line where we need to cut this piece of the fuselage out. So what I do now is I'll take the center glass back off again so that I don't scratch it up when I cut it, the fuselage, and we'll get those two notches cut out, and then we'll get the inside rails ready to go in. Here you can see we have the back of the canopy cut for the rear slider piece to fit in here, and what we want to do now is we want to measure from the back, very back here, up to the front of the forward slider where the canopy is in the closed position, and we need to mark that spot, and that's how big we want our slider rails to be for the rear. And while I cut these out, I also cleaned up the excess resin that was built up inside here where it bridged across for the false floor. So all that's been cleaned out also. So I'll get these rails cut, and then they're going to get mounted in here like this, and what we're going to do is we're going to put a piece of 1/8 inch bolts on here, and at this point right here we'll taper it down to nothing, and then we'll be stood up and do standoff from the inside of this rail back in here, and it'll taper back down this way. So it'll be kind of bent a little bit, but what happens that allows the rear slider to move in and then straight forward up and underneath the fixed glass. A piece of balsa is glued on there. We just glued that on with thick CA, and this will sit inside here, and what we'll do is we'll mark it right there at the end of the outer rail, and we will taper it down to the back so that it sits up against like this, and then it'll bend slightly and glue in like that. Okay, so let me take care of that. I need to make the other side real quick, then we'll get these tapered down and glued in. Here are the left and right rails, the rear rails with the taper at the back end. You can see that the balsa tapers down to a point from down here, and it's 1/8 inch, and it starts the taper right here at these marks and goes down. That's so that we can make the canopy have the correct clearance we want when it goes inside the sliders or the center stationary glass. Okay, we have the inside rails in now. You can see how they run parallel to the main rails, but then taper out a little bit as the canopy comes back. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make the mounts and the sliders for the rear sliding canopy section out of some aluminum angle iron, and we'll get those cut to the same size as the rear piece of the slider here after we cut it out, and once we have that done we can get it mounted up and we can check and see how that works. Here's the piece of angle iron that we're making for the canopy mount and the rail joiners. This side is 5/16 and this side is 3/8 at the marks. This will be the bottom of it where the ball joints get mounted to go into the rail, and the canopy will get bolted to this side where it says bolts. Looks like I am out of this angle iron, so I'll only be able to make one today unless I go to the store and pick some more up over at Lowe's, but which is probably what I'll end up doing this afternoon.
So anyway, I'll get these cut down to shape, and then we'll get the ball joints in it, and we can get it set up and put in the rails so you can see what it want to look like in the rail. Here's the first slider rail. This will be for the right side or the left side of the aircraft. Don't have the mounting holes for the canopy in yet, but you notice it does have 2 ball links on it instead of just the one. That's to make sure that we have a nice snug fit inside the track when we put it in. The rear ball will go to the actuator arm, and that will actuate it. And the way we put these in, I don't know if you can see this, but we laid a push rod down inside there, and then we'll just slide it in from the front. Both ball links in the track, and there it is. There's the slider rail. Right there. You see, grab the push rod from the back side. Moves nice and easy, nice all the way up and in there. Here you can see the rear slider sitting on its rails, the mounting rails. These are actually the sliders that run inside the tracks also. What I did was I just sat it over top, adjusted the height, and made sure the molded framework lined up evenly on both sides. Then I marked it on the side of the fuselage here, and then I trimmed the bottom of the canopies off, the canopy section off, so that it sits down. Right now it's sitting down tight against the top of the fuselage right here. So what we'll do now is we'll mark this. We'll take this off, mark on the canopy where that piece of metal railing runs through there, and then we will actually bolt with 5 bolts both pieces of railing on, and then we'll put it back in and test fit it. And then once we get that test fit and that's correct, then we'll take it back off, bolt everything together off of the aircraft, and then we have to put the stiffener in right here at the front of the rear slider so that it creates the air dam to fit up inside the fixed plastic, the fixed glass. But this should now, when it's bolted on, this should now actually slide up and under and go completely underneath the center glass here. What we will have to do on the inside of this area right here, we'll have to shave some out with the Dremel and the cutting tool or the sanding drum, and take down the ends of these screws that go in here, and some of the resin that's up and inside there, so that the canopy slides freely up and into the inside. So I'll go ahead and get these mounted on here, and I'll test fit it back on, make sure everything looks good, and then I'll glue the stiffener piece in and let it dry overnight. Here's the rear slider canopy with the mounts on it, and you can see the push rods coming off what would actually be the rear of the canopy going to the tail of the aircraft, which the rear canopy slider actuator is going to be behind the canopy. Since there's going to be a full cockpit in here, it couldn't be actuated through the front like the front slider was. So the next step is to trim the bottom a little bit so that it matches the plexan. The Lexan is actually flush with the bottom of the mounts, and then take the mounts back off, set them in place on the rails, and go ahead and put the canopy back on and try it out, see what it looks like. Before we do that though, I think what I'll do is, I know I have to come in here and I have to shave down this bit in here a little bit on both sides. I think I'll do that first before I put the canopy back on. Here you can see we have the rear slider installed now. It's bolted to the slides, and everything looks like it's working fairly well. Slides in, slides out, slides in, slides out. So that's looking pretty good. So the last step for the rear slider is to put the stiffener in, and once the silicone glue dries, put the screws in so all this matches up here. And then we'll move on to the stationary piece of glass in the back. So I'm going to leave it there for today, and next time we pick it up, we'll start working on the last final piece of glass.